In this video, we're going to talk about the Finder tool and also how it can be used along with the measurement tool to bring out some of the information in the images. For the images, we have here some canned images of centrifuged blood that you can see the red blood cell layer as well as the white cell blood layer above it. And what we're going to do for this exercise is find the various layers of the blood types in our test tube and then actually measure the distance between the layers. So in the case, if we wanted to just get the plasma out of the blood, we would be able to inform the host system where within the test tube to find the plasma and where to stop and not get the red blood cells or the buffy coat. So first off, what you'll notice here is these are a series of color images. And for the purposes of our Finder tool and our measurement tool, step one, we have to use the image processing to convert these into a grayscale image, which you see there. Now that we have the images converted into the grayscale, I'm just going to work with this one test tube in the center here. We bring up our Finder widget, and you'll notice it brings up an area of interest, which I am going to drag over to our test tube and expand over the length of the test tube, and you'll see immediately that it found one of the edges. In this particular case, we're looking for find line. And later on we can talk about finding the corners and finding circles, but we'll concentrate on finding lines here. Some of the options you'll see for Finder options, in this case it found the strongest line, which happens to be the very top of the plasma. The other options are leftmost. You'll notice once I hit this, it switches. We'll have to zoom in here a bit. But you can see that the line is now at the top of the red blood cells. And even if we wanted to expand this down to the bottom, I think what we'll find, yeah, is we found the bottom of the test tube. But for the purposes of this video, what we're going to do is just concentrate on these two layers. So I'm going to drag this back up. So in the leftmost case, it finds the bottom of the plasma, or the interface between the plasma and the red blood cells. And then secondly, middlemost in this case isn't going to do much. It stays on the leftmost. But I think if we drag it down to the bottom, yeah, that might be a good example. Middlemost gives you the interface. Leftmost would give you the bottom of the test tube. And then rightmost would give you the top. Once again, a little bit hard to see, but we'll zoom in. The top, the rightmost or the top also happens to be the strongest. So now that we've found the top layer, or the meniscus, what we want to do is then try to find the interface between the two types of blood. Our Finder comes up. We have to drag it over to our test tube of interest in this particular case. And we'll basically lay it on top of the region of interest we had before. So once again, the default is strongest, so it finds the top. What we're going to do in this case is find the leftmost. You'll see the yellow line, or the Finder finds the interface. So that was actually fairly straightforward. And now what we want to do, if this was a machine vision application and we only wanted to get the plasma off, we want to know how deep or what the distance is between the plasma and the red blood cells. We're going to use the measurement tool. I am going to measure the distance between the two using the measurement tool. I'll click on this, and one thing you'll notice, just the way the tool is structured, you can measure between various Finder objects. In this particular application, I only have two, so it defaulted between our Finder 1, which happens to be the top layer, and Finder and Finder 1, which happens to be the interface between the two layers. and it automatically calculated the pixel difference between the two. You'll see down here at 151 pixels. We'll zoom in so you can see the line that it drew. So Finder 1 finds the top, or Finder finds the top, Finder 1 finds the bottom, and then the measurement tool automatically drew the line in between the two Finder patterns, which happens to be 151 pixels. With a little math and knowing the sensor resolution, we can and the distance between the sensor and the object of interest, in this case our test tubes, we can actually convert that pixel measurement into an actual millimeter measurement, and then ultimately give that information to the host system to siphon off the plasma off the top of the centrifuged blood. In this video, we're going to continue with the Finder tool, but we want to highlight some of the different features of the Finder tool, in this case finding circles. So what we have here in our canned image is a rack of test tubes actually imaged from above. So we're going to, step 1, change our Finder widget from finding a line to finding a circle. You'll see that the graphic changes to a circle. And right away you can see that it found the center of the test tube, but as I expand it out, it finds the outside of the test tube. These test tubes happen to be the type of test tube where the center of the test tube, as it goes near the bottom, actually diminishes in size. So what we want to do for the purposes of this video is actually measure the center to center distance between these test tubes. So what we want to do is find, in this case, the innermost, and as you can see, this widget is having a little bit of trouble trying to find that center spot in there. If we move it, it still finds the outside of the test tube. So what we might have to do here is actually delete this step and enhance this portion of the image a bit. We'll go to the image processing widget, go over our test tubes, and in this case it's sharpened, but I really want to bring this out, so I'm going to go to a histogram equalization. You'll see the contrast is dramatically increased. We'll go back to our Finder tool, change it to circle, bring it over the center. We find the center radius, and as we expand, it still finds the outside. But in this case, since we've enhanced it, we look for the innermost circle. It does find the center section of the bottom of the tube. So the difference outermost finds the outside top of the test tube. Strongest still going to be the outside top of the test tube, but we can go and pick the inner diameter at the bottom of the test tube for this particular test by picking the innermost. Now what we're going to try to do is measure the distance between the center of these two test tubes. Now that we found the inner diameter of our first circle, let's use the Finder tool once again to find the center point of our second test tube. Bring that up. We need to change it from line finder to circle. And as you can see with that placement, we immediately find the center of the test tube. But what we want to do is actually expand this out so we can see not only the strongest or inner, but can we find the outer? And yes, in fact we do. We can see the outer circle of the top of the test tube, and then switch it to the innermost, and we find that center, inner center circle at the bottom of the test tube. This one is a little off axis, so that you can see that the center is skewed to the left a little bit, where the first test tube was pretty much right above the camera. But nonetheless, we have found the center point of both of our circles, and at which point we can use the measurement tool to find the distance between the two center points. And as you can see, since it only has the two finder patterns, it immediately goes from finder 1 to finder 2 and measures the distance between the center of the two test tubes as 123 pixels. And as before, if we had information on the specific distance and we know the sensor resolution, we can turn those pixel values into actual millimeter or inch values.